are back. Happy New Year, everybody. Yes, it's your host, Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast episode number 285, brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com, Summit Adjusters, Jim South Street, and featured on HockeyHotStove.com. Just happens to be the best hockey forum website out there. Just go to HockeyHotStove.com, scroll down, and until you see the O&B Puckcast insignia, click on that. It'll take you to all of our YouTube shows. And of course, we are streaming live tonight on YouTube, also on X and Facebook. While you're on YouTube, if you could give us a like, if you could subscribe, we really do appreciate it. And hit that notification bell so you'll know the next time we're streaming another brand new O&B Puckcast. So we got a lot on the docket tonight. Let's get to it. First thoughts with you, Chef. What's on your mind?
Wow. Like, what a fun last couple games, right? I mean, 3 out of 4 were actually fun to last for. So, I mean, and it felt like playoff hockey was back. That's all I have to say. I don't want to say anymore. I just want to get to it, because I want to talk about this even more.
Great. I got my hydration formula tonight. I'm all worked up because after last night, I need it. The great Dan Silver weighing in with his London Knights, the Barkey jersey. What's on your mind, Dan?
Look, we've had a lot of weeks where we're kind of like struggling to talk about stuff. This is not going to be one of those weeks. I mean, there are so many different things to talk about. First and foremost, my boy Denver Barkey with his first NHL goal. And you know what? What I love about it is he doesn't have to be one of those guys who like has to embellish the story about his first NHL goal. A lot of guys just kind of get like some kind of BS goal. No, I started the play behind the net with an unbelievable breakout. I skated full speed the length of the ice and perfectly redirected a puck into the net. Like it's great. So it's kind of fun.
Absolutely. That's great. Yeah. So we're going to get to our host in a moment, but before we do that, I just wanted to remind you, if you do have property damage in PA, New Jersey, or Delaware, don't call your insurance company first. Call Summit Adjusters. And Chef, please remind the folks why you should call Summit instead of your insurance company first.
Yeah, well, we had some crazy weather there. Lots of big winds over the Christmas break and the New Year's break. And so anybody out there, don't call your insurance company. Call Summit first. One wrong word could get you denied on your claim. They have experts to come out in every category, whether it be from roofs or siding, plumbing, whatever it is. They will get you the most for your repairs, all right? Their trained staff has been doing this for at least 25 years, some of them over 30. And, they just know they spent years and years working up great relationships with the insurance companies so that you reap the benefits of whatever comes. So give them a call at 215-752-0560. That's 215-752-0560. Just tell them the Chef sent you.
You got it. Joining us tonight from Flyers.nhl.com, HockeyHotStove.com, FlyersAlumni.net. Bill Meltzer, welcome to the show again. Once again, how you feeling after last night, huh?
A little bit tired, but the good kind of tired. It was such an entertaining game. The house is rocking all night, packed house. Last year's game against Anaheim, the 6-0 game, might have been the best home game all year. So had a feeling it would be another emotion-packed game. Sometimes those end up working against you, but the Flyers just came back from a pretty long road trip. And a lot of times the first game back off a trip is a tough game. Just, takes a little while to get going or whatever. Last night with the building sold out, the crowd was great. You knew that Zegras would be fired up to play his first game against his former team. So going in the expected and a pretty entertaining night, and they deliver that and then some. The only bad thing is a couple injuries on pretty questionable hits, particularly in one case. So,
yeah, a little bit of a Pyrrhic victory. Fun game. Dan, I know you're dying to weigh in after that crazy game last night.
I mean, last year I was at the game against Anaheim, and like Bill said, it was just unbelievable. And there was no doubt from the start that we were just taking command of that game. And the storyline was a little different than this year. I mean, last year was Jamie Drysdale's first game against his old team. He scores a goal. The crowd's chanting, Jamie's better. Cutter didn't look like he was himself the whole game last year. Last night was different because Cutter scores on that one-timer and he gestures to the crowd, like a WWE wrestler or something like that. And I'm thinking, you know what? I mean, I don't like him, but good for this kid. We've been screaming at him for the better part of a year. He can give it back to us a little bit. That's great. So, and now I'm a little worried about where it's going to go from there. But I mean, then just the perfect storyline with Trevor Zegras scoring on the really nice one-timer, having the reaction of putting down the phone and later explaining that he did that because that's how fast the phone call was when Anaheim called him to tell him.
Yes.
And then he scores again. I mean, it was you couldn't have written it up any better. Of course, as we've kind of mentioned, I thought that the Flyers had a number of really hard hits that were clean, whereas Anaheim, I mean, they are a dirty, dirty team. The hit on Ristolainen had a perfectly clean hit on Johnston, and then Johnston just has that hit on Drysdale that was embarrassing. I mean, that one could be a suspension. Yeah. I thought that even though Barkey didn't get injured, I thought that the Jacob Trouba hit, he's not going to get suspended, but that could be a suspension. And, the hit on Bobby Brink, I thought was kind of in the middle. I mean, I didn't have a huge problem with that hit, but I do know that the NHL is kind of trying to get away from those sort of blindside hits. So it was,
Dan, didn't he bring his puck stick in at the end?
Kind of went through with his shoulder.
Was it? All right. Okay.
Up a little bit. But I just thought that there were a number of dirty hits from the Ducks who also have no defensive structure whatsoever. Like, I can see why that team is struggling now. But it just looked like a great game. I mean, I joked on X today. I went on YouTube and got the clips from Slapshot where that was the first thing I thought of, where they announced all the players that Syracuse has brought in to combat, the Hanson brothers and all of that. And that reminded me of what, the Flyers should do this when they go into Anaheim. I mean, it felt like one of those games. It felt like one of the Penguins playoff games from that series where every game was like 6-5 and everyone was going after each other. That's kind of what it felt like. I mean, it's nice to have that kind of hockey back. And hopefully Drysdale and Brink are okay, right? But it was a fun game.
Yeah. From what I was hearing today, now I guess the good news is Michkov will be back tomorrow. Talk said that. I think that both Drysdale and Brink will sit out a game as a precaution. You never know with the situation, particularly high hits like that. Because sometimes it doesn't really present for another couple days, and particularly with Drysdale where they brought out the stretcher and all that. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they're out next game. But the good news is it doesn't seem like it's going to be anything long term, particularly with Drysdale. That looks scary at first, and that explanation that Kevin Kurtz said from the league that it was accidental. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Everybody saw the Hathaway hit, and not just Johnson by reputation, but I mean, he clearly was looking for the first flyer he could run, right? It was 40 feet away from the puck. It was an intentional drive-by hit, and through honestly luck more than anything else, because when they brought the stretcher out, Drysdale wasn't moving at first. To not even get a fine or anything from that is a joke. It's an absolute joke. You're mentioning several of the plays during. I thought Gudas had a pretty dirty one too.
Yeah, on Cates.
Yeah, and we're we know Radko from his years here.
That was my initial reaction when I saw the replay. It did look like he kind of could have hit Cates in the back of the head, and he sort of got him in the back a little bit. I mean, Gudas was just so pissed off that Grebenkin beat him to that puck.
Yeah.
It's just the guy's fuming. I was angry when that happened, and then I saw the replay, and I was like, this is still the Gudas temper, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been.
I didn't think that was fine worthy or suspension worthy, but it was kind of a little bit dirty,
Yeah, that team's dirty.
Yeah.
The Johnston hit to me wasn't exactly the same, but it was reminiscent of Ty Domi on Scott Niedermayer in a way, in that it was clearly predatory, and it was a guy looking for some kind of revenge. And Niedermayer was just chewing up the who was it? Toronto. Domi was on at the time. It wasn't quite as bad, but it was bad enough. So. But
and I mean Ross Johnston by reputation, we all remember him with the Islanders. That this is not out of character for him. He doesn't deserve the benefit of any doubts. And then when you add into the backdrop of what just happened seconds earlier than that, come on.
Yeah,
I will say this. Given like when we had Radko Gudas, he got a reputation, and even when he had a good hit that was kind of questionable. Remember, he would still get a 2-gamer or a 3-gamer.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, I'm very confused. Again, once the players, safety, they're very confusing on how they dial out their punishment, because it doesn't make sense after there's no consistency. I don't know if like it's a committee or somebody's got friends in there or whatever it is. It just, the fines and whatever happens is never consistent,
Yeah. So the three things that come out from the game to me is the fact that it should have been as much of a rout as last year's game, if not for the 1 for 8 performance on the power play. That was a bad thing. Trevor Zegras just really capturing the hearts of the entire city. He's just taking it all in, basking in it, totally gets Philly. And it just, the way that resonated, including the cussing and the after game interview, which is fine with everybody. And the other thing is whether the Flyers are going to be able to deal, if they do make the playoffs, with some of that rough stuff. If that says something to Brière and Jones, like, hey, we might want to get a power forward, maybe a little more skilled than Hathaway. Oh, and an honorable mention, Hathaway looked like the Hathaway of old last night.
Yes, he had a good game.
He stirred up a lot of stuff, and not just the big hits either. He was in the forecheck. He was creating turnovers.
Yeah,
that was the Hathaway that got the extension. That was. He's going to need to do that, because I think over the rest of the year, he's not going to play every game. He'll kind of be in and out. Now he sat for 6, right? So He's back in. If he's going to stay in the lineup, he has to play that way. He has to play that way to be successful. The other thing I would add from last night's game, he didn't see a lot of shots, and that might have played part of it too. It seemed to me, and maybe that was based on just being a little off angle a couple times, but I did not think it was one of Vladar's A games. Now, and the funny thing is, Dostal actually had a really good game for the Ducks, but hard to do much more than he did. I mean, he actually kept them in that game for a long time. He made a lot of saves that really could have been goals. So that was a game where, I don't want to say they got goalie because they got 4 of them, but they could have definitely had more. They could have had 8 or 9 if it had been an off night like the night before, or having for a bit like what happened to the Devils against the Islanders. So.
So
that was another great storyline with with the 2 Czech goalies, Vladar and Dostal. Playing against each other, because I'm a huge fan of Dostal. I just think he's one of the best young goalies in the league, and Vladar, I think he's a Vezina candidate. So that was another fun storyline last night.
Yeah.
So going back to the Hathaway thing, obviously he might get an extra look or a game or 2, but when it comes down, I mean, I will say this: Grabenkin probably had his best game of the season, even emptying that goal. But still, I mean, they were rolling. That fourth line was rolling. They were doing some. I think Hathaway. I can't confirm it, but I think he had like 4 shots on net too. Poor guy's snake bitten it. You just want him to get one and just break the snake bite on it.
At least get a point. That was happening. Ryan Lomberg from Calgary was in a spell like that. The first 25 games, no points, and each game it goes, even if that's not your role. It starts lagging, guys. You want to contribute, at least a little bit, right? You want to get your name on the score sheet. And the other thing I'll say, good point about Grabenkin. The way he beat out the icing, that was really what made that whole thing. That was tremendous.
So, and then I will say this, I'll follow it up. So obviously everybody's now has the 19th of March circled on their calendar, right? Or is it the 18th, 18th or 19th, whatever it is, whenever they play them again in Anaheim. Yeah. Now you're the visiting team. Obviously, is that a game where Nick Delorier gets back in the lineup? I'm guessing now, just just for the simple fact that you can't take runs at the guys now, and if so, I mean, I guess it would be Grabenkin coming out. I'm assuming, but who knows? But
who knows with injuries and all that stuff. Man.
Yeah. But I mean, is it a recommendation at that point to have, or are you just throwing down the gauntlet? Said we're ready for more of this.
Well, little ways to go between now and then, but Ross Johnson is out there for one particular reason, right? Yep. If you're playing Ryan Reeves, he's out there for one particular reason. You have to make that decision as to whether you want to try to counteract that or just play your best lineup. But the Flyers do have a lot of smaller players in the lineup. Now, I loved that the way that Kate stood up immediately for Brink. Mm-hmm. No, it wasn't the dirtiest hit in the world, but it was still teammates standing up for a teammate. And it was his first ever fight too. He said that he had one in junior hockey. It was more of a roughing thing. This is his first fight. So I never did see that they changed the scoring. He would have had a Gordie Howe hat trick last night.
Right. I
actually thought he tipped the shot that was credited to York. So.
Was it true that he was disappointed? Sorry, he was disappointed that he didn't get it. I heard somebody say that he was like, "Did they change it? Did they? Did I get it?"
And York was going, "No, it looked deflected to me."
I thought Grunstrom deflected that in front of the net. Was what I thought. That was what it looked like to me.
Yeah. So York, or rather, Cates thought he got a piece of it, and is what it is. Whoever got the goal got it. So.
Yeah, the bottom line, he had a thrilling game, and we hope that it's one of many for the rest of the year. The closer you get to the playoffs, the more the games mean something, and hopefully they will be able to break through this year. I think it's something that the franchise needs right now, even if it's not, it's going to put them on a path to get the next Celebrini or whoever. But I think, it's not what they're all about. That's obvious. I think we're kind of past that now. So as broken originally by dailyfaceoff.com's Anthony DiMarco, Christian Dvorak re-signs with the Philadelphia Flyers, 5 years at a 5.15 AAV. So no trade protection in there that I think we want to break down a little bit. And Bill, to me, it's I think it's supply and demand. There's no centers out there. There's some synergy between Christian Dvorak and Trevor Zegras, whether it's the hybrid center thing or it's the 55% on the faceoff dot with Dvorak. And maybe it could expand on what you see with this contract and what are the positives and maybe some pitfalls.
Well, first let me address it from the organizational standpoint. Having spoken yesterday with a couple of people, to talk and some others, it was in trying to build culture, and an identity. They love Dvorak as a really good complementary piece as to whether he's up in the lineup, you can move him down the lineup, particularly the contract ages a little bit. He's played a significant amount of left wing in his career, so if you're moving him, you're not blocking somebody. If he's on your third line or wherever, he can play those spots. Obviously, he's really good in the dot, as you were saying. Can kill penalties. Can do a lot of different things for a team. Is he a star? Absolutely not. But he's a really good complementary piece, and the kind of player that winning teams need. The cap hit 515 is, particularly with the way the cap is going up and up and up, that's pretty much going right these days. And considering you just signed him for 5 for 1 year, he was going to get at least a modest raise, and basically he took a more modest raise for more term. I think a lot of people, the 5-year term in the deal is kind of what gave me a little bit of pause on this. On Flyers Daily the other day, Jason Martinez and I were saying that we thought that 3 years is the sweet spot, but we both kind of figured it would end up as 4. 5 was a year more than I thought it would go. I personally would have rather gone a little higher on cap hit for a shorter term by a couple of years, but Dvorak, the term was really important to him, and as Danny Brière and you just pointed out too, Isaiah, that there's not a lot out there on the free agency market, and if you're going to trade for an upgrade, not going to be cheap, right? In terms of the assets that have to go back, in terms of any kind of extension you have to sign the guy to, so I get it, right? Hopefully he stays healthy over that time period, I think as a complementary piece in your team, that's great. Now, if he's still playing your top 6 in a couple of years, I'm a little bit concerned. But for this year, even next year, you know what he brings to the team, and so for the next couple of years, and then you see each successive year too, because and I said this to Danny Brière during the press conference last night, that every year the composition of your team is going to change a little bit. And part of the figuring here is that his role will probably change just a little bit each successive year of the contract too, based on what other roster moves you might make, what injuries might happen, those other things too. So he's a really good piece. It was a really nice signing this summer, and we'll see how the contract ages. But yeah, I mean the only thing to me that you can question is the 5-year term.
Gotcha. Dan, you got some breakdown of the contract structure for us.
Yeah, so the way the contract is structured really makes it look like they wanted to gear it so that if they want to try and trade him in years 4 or 5, that they can. So year 1, so we know what the cap hit is every year. It's $5.15 million. That's the cap hit. If you're thinking about that they might want to trade him in years 4 and 5, it could be to a team that has a lot of cap space. So the actual salary means a little more than the cap hit. So year 1 is $6 million. Year 2 is 5.5. Year 3 is 5. He has a full no trade protection in years 1 and 2, and in year 3, he can have 20 teams that he can basically refuse to go to. Now we get to years 4 and 5. The salary goes to 4.75 in year 4 and 4.5 in year 5, and in year 4 he can only have 5 teams on his no trade clause. And in year 5, it's completely open. He could go to anyone. So they've clearly structured it so that, as he gets to be 32, 33 years old, maybe he's not as effective, they could try to move him. Now, at that point, if he's not effective any longer or he's dealing with injuries, and he has had a lot of injuries over the course of his career so far, it might be hard. You might have to kick in a draft pick to get somebody to take him, right? So there's no slam dunk that they could get somebody to take him. And they do have a lot of money. One of the concerns for me is you've got $8.7 million tied up in Konechny through 2033. You've got $7.75 million tied up in Couturier through 2030. You've got $6.5 million tied up through Tippett through 2032. I see Bill shaking his head. Is that incorrect?
Well, no. What I would add to that is that, because the cap's going to increase every year, probably. So you're really looking more at percentage of the cap in each given year.
I get it, but every team, the cap's increasing for every team. So how every team manages the cap's going to be different. So I guess here's one of my overarching concerns, and that kind of ties into what you're talking about, is I think Danny Brière came out a number of years ago and said the goal here is to make this team a perennial cup contender. Now, for me, the only teams that are perennial cup contenders are the ones with a Nathan McKinnon or a Connor McDavid. Like, these are the teams that are perennial cup contenders. And the way they've got about it, I think it's going to be very unlikely that they're able to get one of these players because they don't get traded. They all seem to get re-signed. I was on hey, maybe we'll sign McDavid in a few years. Like, it doesn't seem like these things happen. So my concern is that they're sort of maybe realizing that it's going to be harder than they think to get a true 1C like that, or a true 1D. I mean, they could have tried to trade for Quinn Hughes. They didn't want to. So that's just my concern. I think this is a team that could – look, the East is not that strong this year. I think they could compete I think they could make a long playoff run this year. I just don't think the way that these contracts are structured, we're looking at a team who's going to be a perennial cup contender every year, like the Avalanche, like the Oilers have been, and that's just one of my concerns.
Yeah, the hardest part is getting the franchise player or two. It's also the year that you're able to draft up that high. And I'm going to use this example of a guy who I was really high on his draft year, Quentin Byfield, when second overall. Has he been franchise changing remotely for LA? Right. So it all depends on the year you're drafting up there, right? And what's available that particular year. It's hard to bank on that. Now it's true. You want to be able to get that guy. There's just so many elements in there. They're going to try to win based on depth by trying to have three viable lines, a fourth line you can play, that kind of thing too. I mean, right now for the first time, the Flyers might not have that 1D, but right now I can't tell you the last time I trusted all three pairs. Right now the Flyers have three different pairs. I trust all three pairs. So that's kind of a big part of why they are where they are. That's what they're going to try to maintain in lieu of exactly what you were saying. You're not going to have that Nathan McKinnon piece, right? You're not going to have that once in a generation type, like a Crosby type who's just there forever and plays at an elite level. But I don't know how you get that player. So
yeah, that's the big question. It kind of takes a discussion to where the Flyers are at right now. Obviously, we talked about Chef had mentioned the Flyers had gone 3-1 since our last show. Their record right now is 22-12-7 for 51 points. Their .622 winning percentage, as we are recording right now, is third in the Eastern Conference, I believe, and that's through 41 games. So a midseason review right at midseason. They're third in the Metro, and of course, the 6 teams back is only like 3 points out, so it could change overnight. But remember, after last season, after 41 games last season, their record was 17-19-5 for 39 points. They're 12 points ahead. I mean, if you just had the exact duplicate of a record, they'd finish 24 points ahead of last year's pace. So, it's been quite an improvement. We don't need numbers to see that. I think, Bill, that the thing is, when you look at the team at midseason, we're still asking ourselves, well, can Vladar make it having never played more than 30 games? He's tracking for right now, he's like 48 or 50 games or something like that. So I wanted you to kind of go through what you think are the keys to their success so far, what has to be maintained, what might fall off, and certainly what has to improve maybe.
Well, keys to the success, I would say that obviously Vladar being they have reliable goaltending, at least the top half of their goaltending tandem has been reliable. That's certainly been a huge thing. I think they have more depth across the forward group. Having a healthy Ristolainen back now helps too. So, but I think it's a pretty deep team. So that's so they might not have elite talent, but I do think it's a pretty deep team, and I think that's helped them. I think that's played into also why it's been a long time since they lost back-to-back games in regulation. Actually, Toronto and Calgary, I think, was those two home games that they lost back-to-back. That was like the last back-to-back regulation losses that they have. That's been crucial. If you're at least getting a point. And not going on these long losing streaks where you're getting no points. And it's so much easier to play from ahead, because even the hard part when a team is chasing is, okay, you get hot, you're collecting points, but then you have to stay hot, right? Because as soon as you cool off, someone else is getting hot. And now those, you're 6 points back, you just made up 5. Okay, well, you just lost 3 in a row. and that team you're chasing just won 3 in a row or 3 or 4 or something, and now you're right back where you started. So that's that's why it's so much easier to play from ahead. The other thing I would point to is the structure. The structure is so much better than it was before. Now we could go on and on about the power play. They change coaches. They change, and it just seems to be a revolving door. Now, I really want to see the real power play captain out of the point. They don't really have one, but there's other elements missing on the power play too, and I don't think it's for lack of ideas. It's just I don't know what it is, because how many coaches has it been? You got to go all the way back to Joey Mullen.
Joey Mullen, yeah, it's a curse of Joey Mullen, right?
They had Chris Knobloch running. They had for crying out, Michelle Therrien running the power play.
No, well, that was a joke.
They had Torchetti running the power play. They had, et cetera. They had Rocky, but it's been kind of a revolving door of coaches from varying backgrounds.
I don't understand the power play. I mean, I put a message out on X yesterday. I'm just had it with it. So 21-22, it was the worst in the league. Yeah. 22-23, it was the worst in the league. 23-24 is the worst in the league. Just think about that. How can a power play be the worst in the league? Like, you couldn't even do that if you tried. Yeah. I mean, 3 straight years. Last year, it was 3rd worst in the league. And this year, it's 2nd worst. It's not like they've got the 4 of us and my cat out there on the power play. Like, we have some reasonably talented players, right? Like, I think Trevor Zegras and Matvei Mishkov are very talented players. Like, we have some of our defensemen. Cam York was running the first power play unit for the U.S. national development team. Like, yeah. I don't even understand it. Last summer, they brought in 18,000 ex-Flyers to try and provide input on the power play. Like, I have no idea. The only thing I look at this year and last year is that they keep changing around the personnel. Like, it's different people on the units for me all the time. Like, and I mentioned this earlier this year, Bill. I don't think you were on this podcast, but someone brought up at a Rick Tocchet press conference, hey, Cam York and Trevor Zegras have been on the ice together for 9 of the 10 Flyers power play goals. And Tocchet goes, wow, really? That's interesting. Like, how do you not know that? What are you guys studying? What are you guys looking at? It just, I don't get it. I don't understand it.
I wish I had some answers for you. If I had answers for that, I'd be at a higher pay grade. But it's completely mystifying because there is talent. There have been talented guys that have moved through. Even Giroux at the end, right? Because the cycle here goes back to the end of G's career. We know what he's done in the power play over his career. So it's I'm not really sure. It's just you can point to missing this or that. They need a net front guy. They need a guy at the point. They need. But it's never felt like just like one piece of the puzzle, like Zegras. He makes so many clever plays with the puck, but the percentage is what it is. So and it's been brutal since December 1st. I mean, one of the negatives from the Anaheim game, you get 1 for 8. They had the 5-on-3 was brutal. I mean that was just an awful 2-man advantage. They had the 5-minute advantage before. Now, Dostal made a couple really good saves, but that was early on in the 5 minutes. I don't know what it is. I mean, there's an element of it that they even though they're improved overall in faceoffs, they still lose a lot of draws on the power play. And then you're going back 200 feet. You're trying to regroup. You're trying to regain entry. I mean, you can slice and dice it 20 different ways, but it all just comes down to this. It's not good enough, and it has to improve. You can lose games, and can lose games on special teams. So it's and right now the PK. We'll look at the other side. The PK started out great, hit a little bit of a rut, stabilized, but the last 2 games has been very good again. So that that really if you're not scoring him, you better not be giving him up either. So that is something that over the course of this busy schedule leading into the Olympic break, I really think that that's something they need to address. I think the PK side of it is something more addressable because we've seen them really good for stretches and even entire years. But that I think they can right that ship. But but definitely, and that might be you're talking about pieces to add by the trade deadline. Maybe trying to add something there, particularly you're going to have Force for the rest of this year. So someone who can, I think one of the big areas where Forster really improved this year was scoring from the flank. We knew he could do it before he got to the NHL, but he wasn't doing much of it. Mm-hmm. And he was actually, I don't think it's entirely unrelated that the power play's downturn has been since Forster's been gone because he showed he could score from different spots on the ice. I mean, Tippett theoretically can, but he misses the net so much. So that's,
Chef, just before you get their lack of a setup for a one-timer. We saw that a couple of times with Zegras. One of his goals was one of them a power play goal.
One was power play.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't have it. They don't set up enough situations like that where the guys are moving, where they get their shooting angle that they need. And this refers back to Forster because he was starting to get that, on his offside at the circle, the one-timer, or even just a look in general, if not necessarily a one-timer. So, that's something.
Yeah, or skating downhill.
Right.
The wrist shot, right? Just so he get the puck above the circle, skate it down a stride, and skate to kind of the hash mark, and he was dangerous from there. They're really not having that right now, and to me, that's the biggest area where he's been missed.
Yeah, Chef.
Well, they got to get a little more greedy. Stop passing it. They're making way too many passes, and when they do, like to Isaiah's point, that when you're making that pass for a one-timer, a lot of times, you see the ones that worked in the game last night with Zegras, and it was to where he was going to be and not where he is. It's kind of like football. When you're throwing a pass, you're not throwing at the receiver. You're leading the receiver. I think what's going on too is a lot. You're seeing it because this. How many times I was starting to keep track of them. I think I lost track at 6 or 7 because I was just so into the game and I forgot to write them down. But if you look at how many times the passes were in the skates the last couple games, it's like the timing is a hair off. So, and I think that as they and I give it to them, the lines were a little jumbled. You're not playing with your normal people, but still, during the course of a game, you expect to get a little more timing back. And I expected that. I didn't see it towards the end of the game. Maybe it'll be different because it looks like, like you said, people are going to be sitting out the next game too. And we'll find out who's subbing in. But I just think if they need, I guess, practice that. And, even if it's just before, a game or whatever, but also to, and what did I just think? I just lost myself on my practice thing. So, Tippett. For Tippett, do we have? Has he worked with the skills coach on hitting the net? I'm not saying it to poke fun, but it just, it's not. He misses way too much.
Yeah. He. Trying to remember who it was said. It was said about Tip. It was said about somebody, but he shoots the way a horse kicks, right? Because it's like Tip is a scoring throw when he takes the puck to the net, and then from any and he brings that great speed. He has has a hard, heavy shot, but accuracy. I don't think that's ever going to be a strength.
Shade to Happy Gilmore.
Yeah, for real.
Come on, is that net regulation?
So, you look at where they're at right now. Bill, do you agree with Kevin Kurz, who said he infers that the move to sign Dvorak kind of says it's playoffs or bust for the Flyers for this particular squad? Do you think that's fair?
Oh, they signed a lot of term here. it sends, I guess, secondarily a message. I don't think that was their specific goal. I really think it was more in terms of planning out, like, okay, if we deal them, how do we replace them, right? Whether it's this season, this off season, whatever. I think that weighed on them more. But within the room, it might send a message because everybody remembers dealing Sean Walker, and the Flyers got a first round pick out of it, right? But the Flyers were in a playoff spot at that time.
Right.
They deal Walker, Sealer gets hurt, and now all of a sudden you're hurting in the blue line. That was part of the downturn they had that year. I do think that in the room it resonates. Hey, we're committed to trying to make the postseason immediately, and then going forward from there. So that might not have been management's point of view, but I do think it resonates with players. I do.
Mm-hmm. So we talked a lot about Zegras, but I think we'd all agree that if you had to pick a first half MVP for the Philadelphia Flyers, it has to be goalie Dan Vladar. Yeah. He's just exceeded expectations of everyone except perhaps the great Dan Silver, and knew all along that
yes.
That he would play with the opportunity that he had.
Yeah, I didn't know he'd be this good, but as we've discussed, since I've liked him over the years all along, and I think it's just because I've had guys he's played with on my fantasy teams, and I've always thought, I was like, man, again, Vladar didn't get the chance in Boston because they prefer Jeremy Swayman, but I always thought Vladar was better than him in the games that I watched. Same thing in Calgary. Like, Dustin Wolf is their franchise goalie, and he's very good, but I just always was like, man, Vladar's he just keeps getting behind kids who teams are viewing as their franchise goalies. And I'm just so glad he's got a shot. He's been fantastic. I really think, Isaiah, like you said, he's been our MVP. He's the reason why the team is where they are. He's been so consistent. Maybe he's had one bad game. He's been unbelievable. And I think he could be the goalie for this team for the next 4 to 5 years, right? And Bjarnason's been good in the minors, and Zavragin will be coming over. But I think now we're just talking about, okay, who can we have as a reliable backup? Because to this point, Sam Erson's been one of the worst goalies in the league. So that's going to be a question over the second half as the schedule gets more compressed, is if he doesn't start playing better, you've got Kolosov, who was named AHL Goalie of the Week last week, I believe. And, that's going to be a question, I think, moving forward. But yeah, Vladar's, he's been great. It's been a great story.
Yeah.
He last season, after the Four Nations, he started seven games down the stretch, and he was really, really good. He was playing at the same level he has been here. Yes, his earlier numbers weren't great, but he was coming off a hip surgery, which takes a full year to come back from. And every time Calgary would have a back-to-back, he would get the second game of the two. His games were tough ones. So, and before that, he had I remember 1 week, he was NHL second star of the week. He had back-to-back shutouts, third start. He had allowed one, and then he hurt his hip, right? Mm-hmm. So he's had some injury issues. That worries me a little, keeping him healthy, because if you're, if he goes, when he missed one game recently, if he were to go down for a significant time, and now all of a sudden you're looking Ersin Kolosov, that changes things. You definitely need. You either need Ersin to snap into plays, or you need to figure out what you're going to do there. I still don't have a ton of trust in Kolosov, despite his hot stretch with the Phantoms race recently. So when you're choosing MVP, it's a no-brainer. The only thing that I'll add to that is, I was talking about the structure early on. We talk about saves above expected, high danger saves. Mm-hmm. It really helps the goalie when you have the structure in front of him, where even if it's high danger, where he knows where the shot's likely to come from. Where things tend to fall apart, whether the Flyers or any team, is when all of a sudden you're getting some backdoor goals. It happens to everybody occasionally, but when you start giving some of those up, now the goalie's cheating off the post to go to the other side, and that's when the short side goals starts leaking into the net. That's where they've helped him out a lot, where the predictability factor, where he knows the pucks are coming from. But still the number one credit goes to the player himself, no doubt. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you think about it, Vladar, when rated for goaltenders that have played at least 20 games, is ranked 11th overall in goals saved against expectations, according to Money Puck. So, I think he's right about, 9 or 10 or something above. And that's an area where Urson's really struggled, So, even though I think he's minus 1 point something. So it's not terrible, but it might have changed since I last looked. But yeah. So Denver Barkey, he does a lot of things right. Hockey IQ seems to be off the charts. We saw he, is going to have some challenges physically. Do you think, how long of a leash do you think he has in the NHL, knowing that they probably thought, well, gee, let him get stronger, let him play in the AHL for a year, and yet we see him and he's kind of holding his own?
I think he'll be here till the Olympic break, and then they'll just then they'll have to make a decision. Then do you send him to the Phantoms for those couple of weeks? I'm always worried when you send the guy down. Does he get injured? Right? Those kind of things. He's an NHL player. You mentioned the hockey IQ, right? The motor that he has, which is very, very high level motor, right? The compete level that he brings every game. Those and he has some skill too. So that all those things. Now, when you're deciding on your mix for a team, I don't care how small he is, right? But when you're building a roster, a guy like Bobby Brink, and I like Bobby Brink a lot, but for the long term, I do think that when you're figuring you're mixing a lot, you don't want to go too small, ultimately. So I'm not really wondering if Barkey's part of the long term plan. He is. I came into the summer wondering a little bit about Brink, again, who I really like. I think he's a good player. I think he adds something valuable to the team. But I am wondering for the long term, what I really like about Barkey, last thing I'll say is that he's another guy. I think you can move him around your lineup however you need to. He can play up in your lineup if you need him to, or he can play a little lower in the lineup too and be effective there as well. He's never going to be a huge scorer, but it doesn't have to be a huge scorer. He'll contribute his points, right? Yeah. So that's I think it speaks to the fact that playing for that London Knights team, the Dale Hunter is very demanding. They named him the captain there. They won the Memorial Cup. He's he has all you look for a guy who can come in and contribute for the long haul. I think he's ultimately here to stay. I'm just wondering with the Olympic break if he goes down for a little while.
Yeah, I think Rick Tocchet just absolutely loves him. Yeah. And so I think as long as he continues to play with this pace and play in the corners like he has, obviously some of the injuries he'll have, we'll see with Forster out, that helps his chances of sticking around for a while. If Brink's going to be out for a little while, it helps his chances. But, I just remember when Rick Tocchet was asked about Jack Berglund in a press conference, he said, well, the first thing I really like about him is he's got the C on him, right? Like that's a big thing for these guys, seeing guys that other people respect. And you watch, like you mentioned, Denver Barkey, I should get the C sewn on my jersey, but Denver Barkey was the captain for the London Knights. And you can just see how much the players respect him already. One of the things that I saw today in practice that I thought, it was a video posted, I wasn't there, that I kind of thought was interesting was after practice, he spent 4 minutes with Michkov trying to have Michkov teach him how to do the Michigan, pick it up behind the net, put it up in the top corner. I thought that was interesting because I don't necessarily think that it's something that Barkey will ever try in a game. I almost thought that maybe it was Barkey trying to form a connection with Michkov, and maybe he sees a guy who's, dealing with some stuff this year and maybe something that a leader type guy would do. And maybe that's part of what makes him captain material and who he is, right? That he's that kind of guy, that kind of player. So I think long-term, he will definitely be here. And I think short-term, I think he'll stick around as long as he's contributing, would be my guess.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Now for Barkey, I had mentioned on our podcast last week, and I thought Dan had said it, the one thing he liked about him was, but it might have been me or whatever, that he's that kind of personality. And I compared it to Mike Richards, but not as a skill level player, but more like that determination, the character, the way he is. I found that you were on Flyers Daily with Jason and you guys had brought that same point up. Now, I mean, can you draw those comparisons between them two? And if so, that's not a bad kind of character to have as a team because, I mean, and the captain similarities. I mean, Richard won pretty much at every level he played, and so far Barkey had. Yeah. So it's that type of player that I think that did definitely one on your team. But did you draw? I mean, that was interesting. I found it interesting. You drew those comparisons too.
I think that it's just similar in terms of character that they bring, in terms of competitiveness. You look at Richards, right? He was far from the big. He wasn't little. Barkey's a small guy. Richards was just kind of average size, average skater, above average playmaker. Not a very good shot, but he would get his goals just by being in the right place, the right time. That he was really more than the sum of his parts, and I think Barkey has that potential to also be more than the sum of the parts. Now he's again good skater. He brings some skill level too. I mean, look, we talked about the power play. Flyers are trying him out a little bit on the power play. He was in junior hockey. He was a major shorthanded scoring threat, but not just in terms of contribute. The one thing about killing penalties in junior hockey, and I've had players say this too, is like, you can score shorthanded goals in junior hockey because you can cheat. You can cheat out of the zone early, and next thing you have a breakaway, right? But you can't really do that in the NHL. If you're caught cheating out of the zone, for one thing, you're sitting on the bench, right? If you're caught, and then B, recovering if you make the wrong choice is much harder. But I do think ultimately Barkey will get some shorthanded goals in the NHL. He'll kill penalties, be maybe a supplementary power play guy, just a guy you can use in a lot of situations. And you need those kind of players. And considering he's a third round pick, that you need those as you build a team. We all focus on the first round picks, but it's the guys after the first round that build your depth, and then hopefully you can have a few who can come in, particularly young, the way that Barkey has, and become long-term pieces of the puzzle. Hopefully, that's what you need.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So when you look at what's coming up, the schedule, it's all compacted with the Olympic break and everything like that. Do you have a gut feeling whether, I know there's so many variables and injury is probably number one. Do you have a feeling that they're going to slip through and make it to the playoffs this year, or you just got to wait and see where you're at with that?
My gut feeling is they make the playoffs. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now whether ultimately it's a wild card team or is a 2-3 in the Metro, we'll see. But I do think they make the playoffs. Yes.
It could be like 96 or 97 points to make it, you think, because of everybody so tight together?
Yeah, so tightly packed. My only slight concern, although they've been now they're winning a number of games in regulation.
Oh yeah, right.
They won so many games early on by shootouts. That when you get into the tie, you're so tightly packed. Once you get, I never worry about tiebreakers really until you're in the second half of the season. Now that you're done the first half, definitely pay attention to how many of them are regulation wins, which again they're starting to pick some of those up because that will determine seedings. Look at Calgary last year. They missed the playoffs on a tiebreaker. They had the same number of points as St. Louis. That very easily could happen this year, not just in terms of who gets as a wild card, right? But also in terms of who's a wild card, who's a 2-3. That's that very well could be the case, and it's so much of it in playoffs, as comes down to matchups. So that's really the one thing, that, and just keeping on where when they lose a game, how they bounce back in the next one too. No long losing streaks.
Yeah.
I had to be, at one point in the season, if you extrapolated the math, there was a good chance that they could break 30 games in going into overtime. I mean, that 34, I think, is the season record for them. But like, it's wow. I mean, that puts a lot of stress on all your guys too, playing extra minutes, and then on top of that, more than half of those games went to a shootout. So you're still, and it's the worst. I think it's harder to go to a shootout for a goalie than it would be for the overtime or a game, because then mentally hard too, because you're if you let up the goal, you're double dipping there, on the guilt side of it.
Yeah, definitely. And plus the Olympics thing with Vladar is a concern, given the volume that he's been used to in his career. It's a slight concern. The top guy for the Czechs would it be Dostal, or who else would be in there?
It's either going to be Vladar, Dostal, or Karel Vejmelka.
Yeah, Vejmelka's good.
And I mean, I would guess that Dostal and Vladar would be the two guys. I mean, look, I think Vladar and I just think they're both such good goalies. Vejmelka's good too, but I think Dostal is one of the best young goalies in the league, maybe one of the best goalies in the league. You see how much that defense leaves him out to dry. So maybe selfishly, as a Flyers fan, I kind of hope that Dostal gets the bulk of the play so we can get a rested Vladar for the rest of the way. But should be fun. I agree with Bill that this team's going to make the playoffs. Like I said earlier, I don't like the fact that I don't think we're going to get that 1C, whatever. But other than that, I like the way that this team is being built, and I think that we will get a few deep runs, because I think that they have already built the culture. They're going to continue to build the culture. They've got the Zegras trade was huge. The Vladar trade was huge. Or signing, the defense is constructed is very good. I think, like Andre, I continue to really like what Andre does. I really like the defense from 1 through 6. So I like what they've done. I just, we're probably not going to get to Colorado territory, right? But I like what they've done.
Yeah. So, but before we let you go, just want to get your thoughts on the WJC tournament in general, and maybe seeing Sweden win with Jack Berglund, and maybe concentrating on the Flyers prospects. And we'll let you go after that long game last night.
Yeah. No. Good World Juniors overall. Interesting, because 4 of the 6 that were there last year, that's counting Berglund. He made the Swedish team, but because of an injury, wasn't able to play. But I am counting it because he made the team. So all the returnees, and that was all of them played well. Luchenko's kind of the interesting one to me, because he only had the 1 assist. And they moved him to the 4th line on the wing, because he played a wing the entire tournament. But they kept him on the power play. They kept him on their second power play unit. So, I didn't hear Dale Hunter's assessment. I haven't had a chance to talk to Brent Flair or the Flyers people yet about what their take on this tournament was. The other guys, Martone had that interesting start to the tournament. There was the first game after the empty net goal. And you know what that reminded me of? If you remember in the 2011 playoffs against Buffalo, game 7, where Brière scored and he gave Ryan Miller that little pat on the head.
Right.
I mean, it was a but it was that kind of thing. They didn't like it. I don't care. I don't care if he gets under guys' skin. I want him to get under guys' skin.
That's what I wanted my guy.
So that totally fine with that. The second game where they barely survived Latvia, no one on Team Canada played well in that game. As Flyers fans, we tend to focus on Martone. That was an off game for that entire team. Latvia was actually the better team in that game. Then you go through the tournament. Then he started scoring quite a bit. Did he dominate, shift in, shift out? No, but he produced, and he produced in timely situations. And he almost got into overtime with a chance to go to the gold medal game against the Czechs in a game they were pretty widely outplayed. So that I really like Martone's tournament overall. Berglund, very complete player. There's there's kind of some Christian Dvorak in him, honestly.
Mhm.
Complete player. The only thing that concerns me a little bit is his skating. He lumbers a little bit out there, like Rodrigo Abels. And I don't think Ruohonen is that far behind Berglund. I really like Ruohonen as well. Very complete center, smart player. And Westergaard, this was his first World Juniors. He had a good tournament too. Unfortunately, he had probably a concussion in the last game they played, so he had to exit that game. I like him. He's pretty exciting, fun young player to watch. For Vanzaghi, just to mention the other guy in the tournament, maybe not the right environment for him, just because he's playing 12th forward, 13th forward, hard to get any kind of a rhythm. The international game isn't really suited to the way that he plays. As much as I like watching Martone, I like watching Vanzaghi too, because he's talking about a nonstop motor, a high compete level guy. He's a guy who doesn't really score much, and I don't think he's going to score much as a pro either. But he's a guy who can make an impact. Kind of, we were talking about Hathaway at his best. I think Vanzaghi can evolve into that kind of a player. Didn't really get too much chance to see it in the tournament.
The thing of watching Martone, I think there's one thing that came to mind when in his draft year about his pace and his first couple of steps. And when you see him around like the creme de la creme, these guys that really play fast with really high puck skill, you can see Martone's hockey IQ. I just feel like at this juncture, his feet are having trouble keeping up with his hockey brain. And that's just going to be a process. And I'm wondering if that process keeps him in the NCAA or makes him play in the AHL next year, or do you think he can compete at the NHL level regardless?
I think he can be in the NHL level. And in terms of his skating, when the Flyers drafted Tyson Forster, his skating was really bad. Really, well below average. Whereas I think Martone is more kind of in the average realm. It hasn't been a problem for Forster, even though he's never going to be a burner. When you have the IQ and you get from point A to point B, and then you just add a little explosiveness to get some separation and whatever. That's really kind of, I think, the only thing he's lacking. So I think he'll be in the NHL next year, and I think he's going to be a very good player. And I think potentially a legitimate first line guy as he matures.
Well.
Berglund I thought was really impressive. Someone made a comment. I forget, it was one of the pundits about how he's always lumbering out there, but he always gets the job done. And he's the captain, just like Martone was the captain. It's never a bad thing to see your prospects as captains of these teams. He's the captain of the first Swedish team to win the gold medal in how long? 20 years. Just very impressive. I thought the Berglund was really good. And the whole Canadian team kind of underwhelmed a little bit. I agree with Bill that Martone is probably NHL ready, but my issue is I'm actually not quite sure that anyone from this group other than Matthew Schaefer is sort of performing above what maybe expectations were. Michael Misa, I thought was just kind of blah. I thought that Elliot Desnoyers looked fine. He looked like he'll be a good NHLer, but I didn't think he was great. Brady Martin, I thought was pretty effective before he got injured. Martone, like Isaiah said, it's the foot speed, I think, is going to be a little bit of an issue in terms of becoming he's probably not going to become an elite NHL player, but he gets compared to the Tkachuk sometimes. I don't think I'd make that comparison yet at this point. And he's got a lot of development to go. But overall, I thought that compared to expectations, I was a little disappointed in what I saw from Martone. But that could go from a lot of guys on the Canadian team. So, Berglund was very good. Ruohonen was very good, as Bill said. He's kind of a similar player to Berglund in some ways. I thought he was Finland's best player in the tournament, actually.
Yeah.
And Lutsenko, I need to start seeing some kind of offensive aggressiveness out of him, assertiveness. he's got 4 goals in the OHL. I mean, the OHL is not what it used to be with a lot of these guys going to the NCAA. I understand he's got a lot of assists and he's setting stuff up, but we need to see some assertiveness. He's very young, so a lot of that can change. But I think that the Flyers brass probably wanted him to be playing center. To me, it just said something that the Flyers are very close with the London Knights management and Dale Hunter, and so the fact that he didn't even have him at center kind of said something to me. And Brière's been adamant that he's an NHL center. Maybe he is, but I won't be shocked if he ends up getting shuffled to the wing, sort of like a Denver Barkey type, because I don't know how much I see it right now. He's a very young guy compared to, some of his contemporaries. So hopefully we see some more from him. But overall, I didn't come away, and this was one of my issues. I didn't come away thinking to myself, man, we've got a first line player. I mean, Martone probably will be a first line winger. I think he's got some room to go there, but I just see Berglund's going to be a really good 2C/3C. Rio Honen could be a 3C type. Lutsenko looks like a third line center. I don't know. I mean, winger, second, third line winger. I just don't see a lot of the elite type of talent, which I'm hoping to see, but I'm just sort of resigned to the fact that I don't know if we're going to have that.
Well, I think Lutsenko, and I'll wrap it on this. Lutsenko just needs seasoning, and before we call what we think Lutsenko is, I'd like to see him in the AHL for an entire season where he gets to work with coaches that can, develop his skill, particularly in the offensive zone. See, he can get there. He knows where to go, and he knows, he's going to get there quickly. It's just, does he really know what to do? And I think that's just, he lacks experience. So that's how I see it. So
I think it'll be a pleasant surprise. That's all I got to say.
Oh, hey, I'm ready for that. I think we got one in Barkey already. So, Bill, we kept you a little bit of OT here, and we thank you so much.
Yes.
Where can people find your work besides all the places we mentioned, or anything you got coming up?
Well, I just started working on a book project with Don Selesky, which is it will have a hockey element to it. But those who know Don's story, Don became an executive with Aramark, and he's done very, very well for himself away from hockey. And the story of how Don left hockey, which is a great story. We don't really have time to tell it here, but it just involves he played for Don Cherry, in Colorado, and he's like, you know what? I don't need this anymore. Like I played for Fred Shearer. I know what good coaching is. Like I'm done. And he walked away from the game and hung up his skates and never really looked back. So a lot of it is really about life lessons along the way and drawing parallels too between hockey and the business world and things like that. So I'm having a blast working on it. Don has a ton of great stories and a lot of cool perspectives. So that's my other project away from the other stuff you talked about. It's been fun.
Oh, fantastic. All right, Bill, thanks again for coming on and playing OT with us here, and have a great night. I'm sure we'll see you down the road again very soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Bill. Always great.
All right. You take care.
Thanks,
now.
Bill.
All right. We have Anthony DiMarco up next. I just wanted to remind people about Jim's South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, 40 years of the finest cheesesteaks and hoagies and the grandest Philadelphia tradition. You want one. So get down to 400 South Street in Philadelphia, Jim's South Street. Fantastic stuff. Okay. So bringing on to the stage from dailyfaceoff.com, Anthony DiMarco, you broke the Christian Dvorak contract news. We've had a lot of opinions, and now we've had a couple, 24 hours or so to let it set in. What's your feeling?
Well, first off, guys, sorry for bailing last week, and I'm sorry if the imaging isn't great. I still have to stand up. My back is still not back to 100%, but thanks for bearing with me on that. Yeah. The Dvorak, my feeling on it, I mean, it's one of those things where it's just like, if you want the player, that's the contract that needs to get done. And I held a Twitter space yesterday, and my feeling is that I think most people have come around to the fact that in a vacuum, it's not to say it's a good contract, but it's a market fair contract.
Mhm.
Like, if let's say the Colorado Avalanche or the Edmonton Oilers had signed this contract to play 3C behind McKinnon or Brock Nelson or McDavid or Draisaitl, I don't think anyone would bat an eye. I think most of the concern, and valid concern at that, is, okay, so how are we going to win with a collective 1-2-3 punch of Dvorak, Cates, and Sean Couturier? And that's completely valid. My takeaway from this is that the Flyers said to themselves that there is no internal help coming between now and the 27-28 season. I didn't hear that specifically, just based on their movement, their moves to this point, and the conversations I've had. That's my gut feeling. And with all the parity in the NHL, like, there's not a better option. Like, a lot of people are just like, well, go get Tage Thompson. Well, do you think Jarmo Kekalainen is going to be like, you know what? We just won 9 of 10. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to trade Tage Thompson. You know, like, and aside from that, it's like, okay, we'll go get someone on the trade market. Kadri, Braden Shen, Ryan O'Reilly, are any of those guys better additions than Christian Dvorak at this point in time? It's frustrating, and it is bothersome. And maybe then it kind of like the tentacles spread to like, oh, well, you messed up the drafting and whatnot. And it's all fair criticisms, 100% fair criticisms. But you do have to adapt on the fly. And I have to give Danny Brière and Keith Jones credit where, like, let's say they chunk the Luchenko pick, hypothetically. Are they just supposed to cry about it? Like, they have to be like, okay. And I could tell you, they were not overly impressed. I heard you guys talking about the World Juniors. They weren't impressed with him at the World Juniors overly. They had no issue with the usage of him by Dale Hunter, as compared to last year, where they were really not happy with the usage by Dave Cameron, who did a horrible job with Team Canada. So maybe it's just them adapting on the fly. And look, if you want to berate the Luchenko pick, that's completely fair, 100% valid. But you can't just cry about it. You have to adapt. And I think for the Flyers at this point in time, they said, you know what? In the here and now, we need Christian Dvorak for at least the next season and a half.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah, Dan.
I mean, we've talked about this before on the show, but it's, Anthony, it's so impressive the news that you break for the Flyers. I mean, from the Chuck Fletcher being let go to Dvorak, and it's the line that you've cultivated into the Flyers is great. And I think on behalf of all Flyers fans, we thank you for that. So that's a job well done. It's interesting you talk about Luchenko and that maybe they weren't overly impressed with him. Do you have any idea about, because Nesbitt's another guy who has had very underwhelming production this year. I know he's going to be a project. He's a bigger guy. I mean, do you have any insights into what their thoughts are on his development so far this year, or you have not really heard anything?
Well, Nesbitt's an interesting one because he wasn't even at the World Juniors. The guy that I heard the most about, or the two guys, was Ruonin and Jack Berglund, because obviously look over here at the guys that are doing well as opposed to these two guys that are disappointing. Like, Nesbitt to me is that, and, you know, I spoke to my colleague Stephen Ellis about it, and he said, like, he has the skill set with the puck, but I think the skating and the pace of his play is a ways away. So I think Nesbitt was maybe one of those picks, and Dan, you're way more knowledgeable on prospects than I am, but maybe Nesbitt was one of those picks where they said, you know what? We either want someone that's going to hit as a top 6 guy or just a complete bust that's never going to show up. Maybe. That's just my spitballing. I was not told that. Because I think with Luchenko and Berglund at least, and maybe to a slightly lesser extent Ruonin, they're going to have some middle 6 centers to varying degrees. So, you know, we critiqued Ron Hextall for drafting like high floor, low ceiling players. Maybe Nesbitt was a guy where they're just like, you know what, there's a skill set there. It will take a lot of time to put it together, a lot of work to put it together, and maybe he will never put it together. But if he does, maybe it's the type of guy we want. Because, again, I defer to you guys, all of you, about I'm not a prospect guy by any means, but Berglund, Ruonin, Luchenko all kind of seem to be cut from the same cloth to again, maybe Berglund's more hockey IQ and like his more strength to his game, Luchenko's speed and whatnot. Ruonen's more of a defensive shutdown guy. But I think maybe Nesbitt was just like, okay, let's just take a high ceiling, super low floor pick. And all I could say is that collectively, I don't think they're expecting any of these four guys. And not to say that they can't surprise, right? Like, look at Denver Barkey. Like, I think Danny Brière said it in his media availability yesterday. They were not expecting him in the NHL until at least next season. Now he's in the NHL and really performing. He's like a spark plug on that team. So, I mean, for me, I just think that for the time being, they're saying, like, we are not expecting any of these four guys to be impact players until at least 27, 28.
Yeah, I mean, with Nesbitt, I don't see yet that much of a difference between him and a guy like Berglund. The only way Nesbitt becomes a 1C massive upside guy like you're mentioning is his skating would have to become much better. So I sort of get it, but I sort of don't, because I think if you're looking for a guy that could be, you think has a massive ceiling, I just think the skating's got to be a lot better than Nesbitt.
And I agree with you. Again, like, I trust your opinion with that, and that's probably a reason why he wasn't on Team Canada. But as someone mentioned to me, like, Denver Barkey wasn't on Team Canada last year, and now look at him. So
I think Nesbitt still has a lot of upwards potential. I just, his skating is going to have to get a lot better.
Yeah, he's a project. Yeah, I think Luchenko, in his way, in a different way, is a project.
Yes.
The fans have to get used to the idea that he may take up to 2 years in the AHL. Not that it could. I said to Bill, we just had Bill Meltzer on. I said he knows where to go, and he knows he can get there very fast, but he doesn't know what to do when he's there, especially in the offensive zone. And he needs a lot of coaching. He is younger. He just missed qualifying for the next year's draft. He could have waited. It was like a week, and he would have been in the following draft. So, but then again, his draft plus 1 year is not really that overwhelming. And Chef, let me go to you before I get carried away there.
No. I was going to say, well, they had 3 of the top 10 scorers from the tournament on the Flyers, prospects, but. I was just wondering how much of a surprise was Ruohonen for do you know anything about that? I know Dan asked about Burt, about other players, but I mean, it seemed like he really stepped up and was like as Dan had said too, and I agree earlier, he was Finland's best player. So, I mean, and he just seemed like he had a commanding presence on the ice. He only wore an assistant number and assistant captain, but he seemed like somebody that might be a little bit ahead of where he's supposed to be.
So Ruohonen, it's weird. Like, I attended 2 games or 2 days last year at the World Juniors because it was in Ottawa, which is about an hour and change away from my house. And I remember one of the games that I went, one was more just as a spectator. And the other one was for Daily Faceoff. And I remember the second game that I went, the Flyers' entire brass was there. Keith Jones wasn't there, but Danny Brière was there. Patrick Sharp was there. Brent Flair was there. Bob Murray was there. And I remember speaking to someone, not necessarily there, but I remember speaking to someone, and they specifically pointed out Ruohonen's game and how last year he was such a defensive force, specifically in that game. So I think that maybe this year he gets more of an offensive role, as now I guess back then he was 18, 19, now he was 19, 20. And so maybe for us it was a surprise because he was a 4th round pick, a 3rd or 4th round pick in the Luchenko draft.
4th, I think.
But for them, they were probably pleasantly surprised, but at the same time, they liked what they saw last year. Now, it's not the same, I guess, area as Jack Berglund, who I think even Anthony Sanfilippo mentioned on So the Goalie that, like, you've heard Danny Brière say it a lot. People that I've spoken to a lot have been bringing him up a lot. Like, they've kind of been tracking him. He's playing against men as opposed to Ruohonen, who's playing in college in the United States. The one thing about Ruonin is I spoke to a scout from a Western Conference team, and they said they wonder if he's maybe being miscast in college and he's trying to become a player that won't translate to the NHL. So my gut tells me is that as long as Ruonin stays in that like defensive shutdown role, which I know we're going to roll our eyes because we're just like, oh, we have Cates, we have Luchenko, and I get that. But I mean, if Ruonin is let's say 3 years out, that's right in line for when Cates' contract expires. So it may be Ruonin's a guy that they have a built-in successor to a guy like Noah Cates down the line.
Okay. Yeah. I think the thing is that, and you mentioned with Dvorak, these kids are going to take time, and the Flyers are going to have to probably make some kind of trade. What about the idea, before we move on and talk about your article about Ristolainen and the trade deadline, what about getting a kid who is in a system that has a lot of centers, team wants to win now, and he's really good, but the timeline, like we talked about it offline about the guy I thought the Flyers should have taken that day. They weren't going to take Zeke Boyum. Kansa Helenius is a really hot prospect. I know they really like him in Buffalo so much they didn't want him to go to the World Junior Championship. If the Flyers offered a lot for a player like that because they thought he could be a center, is that even a possibility?
Yeah, I know they spoke about Marco Rossi a lot, and if you ask the Twitter, contingent on Flyers fans, they all hate me because everyone aggregated my story into something that wasn't true.
Right.
But I asked the Flyers about maybe Charlie Strommel, I believe is the name, who's still playing in college. That's in the Minnesota system. I hope I'm getting the name right. The problem is, Isaiah, is that there's just so many teams that don't have enough centers. And with the expansion, I think the first position that got hit was goaltending, that there's just not enough good goalies in the NHL. There are probably a few goalies who just shouldn't be in the NHL, along with the fact that goaltending injuries are just becoming more and more frequent. And inherently the position is becoming a lot more volatile. But I think now we're starting to see it down the middle of the ice as well. And, I was speaking to someone from New Jersey yesterday about the Dvorak contract, and he told me if we were now Jersey's kind of in a free fall, but they've been on the hunt for a 3C for a while. Now they've kind of made it work with a combination of Cody Glass and Dawson Mercer, the latter of which could really flex from wing to center. But he told me Dvorak's the exact type of guy that we would have paid a premium for. So now you got to find a team that is out of the mix, which there are few and far between because of all the parity in the NHL, that also is deep at center. And again, it's Buffalo was one of those teams, but now all of a sudden they're winning and Josh Norris is healthy. And you're saying, man, Thompson down to Norris, down to McLeod, down to Peyton Krebs. That's a really nice 1, 2, 3, 4 center punch. So why are they going to upset the apple cart? All of a sudden it's just there's not really any redundancy in that Buffalo lineup. I guess you could look at the Winnipeg Jets, but then it's just is Cole Perfetti a center? And I don't want to go down that road again. If you're trading for a guy, he has to be a center. And I think that's why I was kind of big on the idea of going for a Marco Rossi, just because I was saying yes, he may not have the highest ceiling. He may be a bit undersized, but he is a center. So I thought maybe if you could just lock down that young guy. So to answer your question, Isaiah, yes, I think that's absolutely in the cards for them. I just think with the parity of the NHL, along with there just not being enough good centers in the league, they just have realized that at least for this season, coupled with the fact that the 2026 UFA pool is non-existent, even Alex Venberg got extended 3 years.
Yeah.
I don't even know you pronounce it Wen or Ven, but he got paid $18 million. You know what I mean? So it's
Well, now with Ven, guys like that get paid. No, but that's 3 years, $6 million, and that's a guy who is not even as good as Dvorak. Yeah,
and I think, and I could tell you, I spoke to someone with the Flyers at noon on Monday, and he told me no, from everything I know, they haven't gotten any calls on Dvorak. And then at 5:30, it was just funny enough, after we hung up, they started getting traction between the two sides. And way it was kind of explained to me in not so many words, was that the agent called Danny Brière and was probably like, hey, like, we have this comp now for Wenberg. This is where the starting point is. And the text I got was like, it effed us, which is like, and then I spoke to another agent about it yesterday, and he said like, oh yeah, if he goes on the open market, he's getting 3 years, probably 6.5 plus. So it's like, what do you do if you're the Flyers? Now, would you have rathered 3 years at 6.5? I mean, that's a debatable topic. I'm more of the beliefs of the 5x5. That's just my opinion, because I think in the next 3 years, when you're trying to compete, every penny counts. But I mean, it's really down to that. Would you rather 3 times 6.5 or 5 times 5.15? And I guess in a long-winded answer, it's just like, I just don't think there's enough good centers, and there's not enough teams ready to sell right now.
Look, I've made peace with the deal. I mean, I was never ambivalent. I was worried about the term, and then you see the no trade is basically nothing in year 4, and it doesn't exist in year 5. So I'm fine. I mean, the thing that's intriguing is you come out with this piece. You got to go to dailyfaceoff.com to check out Anthony's latest stuff. Also at DiMarco 25 on X, so you keep up with the stories and Daily Faceoff hits there. Ristolainen is not untouchable. And it brings to mind what other opportunities, if Risto is there, and I realize the cost would seem prohibitive, but Risto is a guy the entire league likes. And coming off of a game last night, you could see the value of having that big physical defenseman who can answer back, especially for a team that like Anaheim, who is throwing cheap shots all over the place.
Oh, yeah. Anaheim. Like, Radko Gudas aspires to be Rasmus Ristolainen. Or maybe he's Ristolainen circa 2020. Maybe. But, you know, the Rono analyst used to be Andy Rono. Whatever. Yes. He's a nice guy. He came out with a graphic today. And, again, like, take it with a grain of salt analytically. But I think it was 85 percentile in even strength defensive metrics. And aside from Travis Sanheim, he's getting the second highest deployment in terms of D zone versus O zone starts. So, and I do think that we could say right now, like, he's not just like a bottom pair. Like, Ristolainen's a legit second pair defenseman, a legit second pair shutdown defenseman. And, you know, that's, I mean, kudos to, and I know everyone's going to start throwing stuff at me virtually here, but kudos to Chuck Fletcher for saying, like, if we rebuild this guy, we have a really solid player. And they do. And more so is that he is the player they thought he was, all of a sudden, like, guys, are you telling me that if Risto was a free agent this summer, someone wouldn't sign him to a 1-year, $5 million contract? Like, or even a 2-year, $5 million? Like, he is more than worth that contract and worth it in spades. I'm surprised that the Flyers are willing to move off of him, because I do think they need punishers. And like you said, I think it's very beneficial when you have a guy who could answer physically like that. But to your point, Isaiah, do it cleanly. Like, Risto was just throwing clean body checks, and he's also just very good. He is the definition of a stopper. Like, yes, is he going to fly up the ice with the puck, like, kind of like how he used to be? But, like, the amount of times that Risto just knocks a guy off the puck and chips it off the glass and out, that's what you need sometimes. And the other thing is I like that they're giving him a chance on the power play, because he does have a heavy shot. So I think for the Philadelphia Flyers, they're saying, like, this is a good positive year. We want to make the playoffs, but we still have our sights set on 2026, 27 and on. That has always been their goal. And maybe they're saying, like, man, like, Risto's awesome, but, like, we're playing really well without Risto and with Noah Juulsen. Now, I did ask that directly, and the person I spoke to said, well, no, we have to keep in mind that Juulsen is ideally like a 7, and Juulsen is probably the best number 7 that you could get in the NHL or in that range. But I think the Flyers are looking at it like, you know what, like, we can't get ahead of ourselves, and if we get an opportunity to flip him for a Brandon Carlo type of return, like, I use the Ben Sherratt example in my article, but look at Brandon Carlo. At this juncture, Rasmus Ristolainen is probably better than Brandon Carlo. And if the Flyers, let's say, eat $1 million on that contract, make him a $4 million player, you're telling me that someone's not going to pay a first-round pick, maybe a third-round pick, and a prospect? Like, that is the exact type of, like, especially like a team like the Dallas Stars. A lot of people brought that up in my Twitter space. They've been like salivating for a right shot guy for years, to the point where they brought in the likes of like Dumba and Petrovic. They traded for Chris Tanev last year. I think they're a team that would be really in on a guy like Rasmus Anderson. They have 2 Finnish defenders, like a Heiskanen and an Esa Lindell.
Right.
Like you put him with, let's say, like a Thomas Harley or an Esa Lindell, let's say, that's probably one of the best shutdown pairs in the NHL. And I think for the Flyers, if you, let's say, load up on picks, because I have heard that they're not overly high on this coming draft class. And if you see the picks that they've acquired over the last 12 months, it has been heavily like concentrated on 2027. But I think for them, they're saying like, man, like if we could get a bunch of assets to go into next season towards the trade deadline, and let's say we have 3 first-round picks and 3 third-round picks to play with, is it worth giving up on Ristolainen? And that's not even necessarily to say that like they would move off of Ristolainen and stand pat. Like for me, I asked the person I was speaking to, I said like, well, would you maybe like try and replace him with like an Eric Johnson? And he said, yeah, that's for sure part of something that we would look at. So like, imagine you flip Ristolainen for a first, a prospect, and a third, and then you take that 3rd-round pick and go and get a guy like Luke Shen out of Winnipeg. Winnipeg's in a free fall. I believe Shen is on an expiring contract, and he comes and plays that role. Obviously, it is a regression, and it does hurt your chances in the playoffs, presumably. But I just think they're wanting to make the playoffs, but their goal is beyond this season. And maybe for them, they're just like, man, we don't want to lose that $5.1 million. And right now, we're better to allocate that money to a Christian Dvorak and get off of a Ristolainen because of the overall chemistry of our blue line. And I'll just end it with this, is that they're one of the best defensive teams in the NHL right now. I think Bill was mentioning it earlier on your show. They don't have that top dog, but every single pair is relied upon.
Yep.
And it has been a long time. So maybe they're saying like, man, maybe we capitalize high on Ristolainen, and even if we have to bring in a lower body down, we have enough faith in the other guys to really compensate for such a loss.
I just want to see Risto in the playoffs because I think it's going to be a sight to see. I think his game is geared to playoff hockey, and it's a shame he hasn't gotten there yet. So wherever he goes, at least I hope he goes to somewhere that's contending, and we get to see playoff hockey if we do move him. Or you could stay here with us and do it here.
Yeah, I mean, the way that this defense is constructed with York, Andre, and Drysdale, and even the Flyers have, all along they've kind of said that they have concerns about having a defensive core that's that small. And now that Risto is finally playing like this, I don't know. I'm not sure that I trust them enough with how they're using their draft picks to trade Risto for a first-round pick with how he's playing. I mean, they traded 2 first-round picks to move up to take Nesbitt, who, again, we'll see what happens. But I don't want to see them just kind of blow through draft capital by trading guys like Risto, because I do think that this team could, the way you look at the Eastern Conference this year, and aside from Carolina, no one really scares me. And if we're not going to go down the path where we're going to end up with a McDavid or a McKinnon or a Draisaitl, like, I'm not sure we're going to become a perennial cup contender. This year, I see a path to us being a competitive team in the playoffs. I'm not sure I would move Ristolainen for draft picks the way that this team is currently constructed. Because when I'm watching a game like yesterday against Anaheim, which is violent and physical like playoff games are, I'm saying to myself, man, thank God we've got Risto in the lineup. And to your point, Anthony, they can't, none of these, York has been decent on the power play, but he doesn't have a great shot. Drysdale, they basically have taken him off the power play at this point. And Risto has that big shot. So it's kind of interesting to see him back there. He just brings something that I don't think anyone else on this blue line brings. That if they're going to make a deep run in the playoffs, like, it doesn't make as much sense to trade him, but
no, I agree with you, Dan. I agree with you. Like, they've literally, like, maybe we suffered through year one of Risto when it was like the AV Mike Yeo year. And then I think he was injured to start the first year at Tortorella. And then he came back in early November. And I think he played 3 games and he was just an absolute disaster. And they just scratched him and they're just like, no, full stop. We're rebuilding you. And you've rebuilt him into the exact type of guy that you need in these playoffs. And like, when guys like Bill Zito are like trading first round picks and Spencer Knight for Seth Jones, and the Leafs are trading Fraser Minton and a first for Brandon Carlo. And if you go back a few years, the Canadians trading a first round pick for David Savard, or the Panthers for Ben Sherratt. Or like, look at what Chris Tanev went for. Like, these are the guys that you covet. And I agree with you, Dan. And honestly, full stop, like, Carolina doesn't scare me personally, because I think that they've just really benefited from a poor Metropolitan division the last several years. And to be quite honest, guys, like, the reason why the Carolina, and I've had more than one GM tell me this, Western Conference GMs too, the reason why Carolina does so well in the regular season is because they play the same way every night, whether it's an afternoon matinee game in October or a dog day Tuesday night game in February. They play like clockwork. And the reason why they get rolled over when they play a true cup contender is because in a 7-game or less series, they don't adapt. They can't adapt. And you just poke holes in their game as the series goes on.
They can't raise your level, what you're saying.
Yeah, like, it's like they're always the same. And there is and look, I'm probably gonna catch a lot of shrapnel for this, but like, Rod Brind'Amour is the most overrated coach in the NHL. Best motivator, but there is a reason why skilled players don't excel there and they don't stay there, because he doesn't adapt to skilled players. You can't just be like, okay, Mikko Rantanen, like, that's awesome that you're a 100-point guy, but you're going to dump and chase and you're going to get the same ice time as Jordan Martin. You know what I mean? Like, and I get it's like, oh, that's their identity, work hard, and like, their pro scouting stuff, and not to go on a trash tangent of the Carolina Hurricanes, but it's all to enforce Dan's point that, like, yeah, I'm not sure that I would trade Ristolainen. But this is more of a theory on my part, Dan. I don't think that they're accumulating draft capital beyond this season to use. I think they're accumulating draft capital to attack the trade market, because Danny Brière even kind of said it in his media availability yesterday, where he's just like, well, there's no centers in free agents. And if you want to acquire them via trade, it's going to cost you a lot of assets. And maybe for them, they're just like, you know what, it's going to be a kick in the pants this year if we have to trade Ristolainen. But if we are, let's say, in a similar position next year at the trade deadline, but now we have 3 first-round picks to deal with, and you have, let's say, more clarity on what Martone or Luchenko are, and then you could be like, okay, so maybe we can make a Luchenko available, or a Berglund expendable, or for me, like, now he's injured, but I've long thought, like, man, like, I love Tyson Forster, but you can compensate for his loss. Use him as a trade target. Like, that's where and again, it's just a hypothesis, but my thinking is they want to accumulate assets to attack the trade market, because they're quickly realizing that it's not going to happen in free agency. It's going to have to be in the trade market. So if you have 3 first-round picks at your disposal, which inherently makes pre-existing prospects and young players on your roster and in your organization expendable as well, it gives you a lot more leeway to play with the trades and give teams more enticing packages.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Well, yeah. I mean, the alternative would be to try to get a young prospect, like what I mentioned from the outset, to trade Ristolainen. At this point, it would be a very low first-round pick. But if you have a couple of them, like you said, I mean, I could see that rationale. So there's effectively 2 trade deadlines. There's one before the Olympics, and then a real narrow path in between the end of the Olympics to March 7th, the actual trade deadline. Before we let you go, are you hearing a rumor about how, when they think GMs will be more active, before the Olympics or after? And do you hear anything in general that would be of interest to the O&B audience?
Well, I think you just have to wait until the parity kind of goes by the wayside. Like, we kind of had like a mini trade deadline before the holiday break, where Quinn Hughes went, and I believe there was another trade or a signing or two. But I just think you have to see some teams fall out of it. Like, I think one of the last times I was on here or on other podcasts, I said, like, yeah, like, maybe Buffalo and Calgary are those two teams. And now all of a sudden, Buffalo is on a heater. And Calgary, it doesn't take too much to get their owner fired up into being as delusional as you can get. So then you look at the Winnipeg Jets, and the Winnipeg Jets are the least desirable place to go to in the NHL. I don't want to go there. Their most attractive, probably thing is that they're the headquarters for Canadian National Railway. So that tells you all you need to know about Winnipeg. So I don't imagine that they are going to be in a hurry to get off of a lot of their significant players. So I think Isaiah, from that standpoint, it just really depends when the parity starts to fall apart in the NHL, whether it be before the Olympics and after the Olympics. As far as the Flyers go, I mean, obviously now everyone's kind of looking at Trevor Zegras, what's going to happen there. Yesterday I was talking with someone, I was just like, man, maybe it was good that they waited because he somewhat slowed down a bit. And then he comes out and has that game last night.
Yeah.
Look, I've long thought that his AAV is going to come around $9 million. That's what I think. It's just because, I don't know how his agent, Pat Brisson, or even the Flyers can be realistic and be like, you know what, he's going to get a lower average annual value than Travis Konecny. That I can't see that. Mm-hmm. He is their most dynamic player right now, and I still think there is a chance that he could be a center. So what I had heard, and this was more like hearsay, I didn't hear it directly from the organization, but more hearsay by someone I relatively trust, that the Zegras camp is in the 10s and the Flyers are in the low 8s. Now, I don't think he should get near 10, but I mean, if it creeps up around 9.5, at this point, you created to his Robin, you got to pay Batman now. That's, and the thing is and again, not to give the Flyers front office too much credit here, but imagine they didn't hit on all of their free agent signings or their offseason acquisitions. Every acquisition they made in, even a Carl Grundstrom has been really good, who they got for free. A Dan Vladar and Zegras, it's a coin flip for who is the team MVP. Christian Dvorak is now the new number one center in town. Even a Noah Juleson, who people hated irrationally, was a really good stepping guy and a reasonable facsimile for Ristolainen in the first 2 months of the year. So, I mean, I think for them, that's the first order of business. And as I said in my article, the fourth line is playing better. I just still feel like if there's a fourth line center out there, maybe you go out and get him. One guy, I thought maybe when he became a free agent would have made sense is David Kampf. Again, Vancouver falls into that delusional organization category. So they'll probably hang on to him as their second line center, if you will. But I think that's and again, I know it's not the most sexy acquisition, but I don't think they're going to go big game hunting for someone because of the way Denver Barkey's playing. I think in an ideal world, they want a rough and tumble power forward in that middle six. I just think that maybe they're saying you know what, we'll stick it out for this year. And Hathaway played really well last night. I think you guys were talking about that before. Probably one of his best games. If Hathaway could give you that type of game, and you have Grundstrom and Grabenkin, who also are playing well, kind of giving you that, maybe between now and next year, you deal with it in the immediate future. But then in the summer, you move off of a Bobby Brink, and you either solve it in-house with a Martone or a bump, or you go out and attack it there. But I do think that the size and physicality aspect on the wings could, and again, Dan, you could probably speak to it better than me, but I think that they've already addressed that in their recent draft years, and they could probably solve that internally if they just leave it to an organic process.
Yeah, they went so big in the draft this year. I don't think they need to keep focusing on that. And Shane Van Zaghe was kind of disappointing at the World Juniors, by the way, and he's kind of been disappointing this year in college. It's going to be different growth periods for these guys, but they drafted so many big guys. I don't think they need to kind of rehash that. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, between now and next year at Christmas time, there's a good chance you have Alex Bump and Martone in the lineup. Now, I don't know so much about how physical Alex Bump is, but he is a big body from what I could tell. And Martone, we know what kind of game he brings. I'm just how many and then you have guys like Hathaway and Grundstrom and Grabenkin in your middle six. And I think Grebenkin is slowly showing that, like, if you work with him, you know, maybe he could be that Dan Carcillo type where he finds chemistry with a Richards and a Gagne, and all of a sudden he's a top six forward. Like, obviously it's a bit of a stretch here. That, just to focus on Grebenkin for a second, like, I think that he is very similar to Wade Allison's skill set. And I just think that he's a guy I would like to see give a shot on the power play. I would wonder about that just because he's a left shot guy. Who are the Flyers' two most creative offensive players? Zegras and Michkov. If you have one of them on the half wall, maybe you could try and recreate what they did with Giroux and Simmons, but on the opposite side.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, maybe that tripod system, because aside, I think the main issue with the Flyers power play is that they don't have a shot threat from up top, and they really don't have a good net front guy. And I know people kind of scoff at that, but I think a solid net front guy is very, very important. And they got a few goals through traffic last night. So I think, like, getting, like, so maybe if you have a Risto at the top, you put Grebenkin up like in front of the net. I'm not overly committed to Travis Konechny on the power play. I don't know about you guys. I would actually much rather an Owen Tippett, because I think Owen Tippett has that trigger man capability. So maybe you put him in the high slot that could kind of like float between the slot and to the half wall. And maybe you overload the left side with Zegras on the half wall and Michkov down low. Like, sometimes you got to, like, I know we all like to just go with the Peter Laviolette invented power play from 13 years ago with the 1-3-1, but, like, if they don't have the horses,
you don't have the personnel. You can't.
They just got ponies. That's it.
Yeah, that's it. So, like, put Michkov in the corner so he could do a lot of work down low. Overload that side with Zegras up top as the facilitator. I think Owen Tippett's great at kind of floating around and knowing where to go and get that shot off. Probably the best shooter on the team right now in the absence of Tyson Forster. Use the big shot from Ristolainen. I know I kind of went off on a tangent here. I'm sorry, guys. And give Grebenkin a shot net front. So maybe he could recreate that tripod that Wayne Simmons had from all those years ago. So
yeah, maybe. I think the problem with Risto at the point, he's not a great puck handler. If you challenge him and he doesn't have great recovery speed, that would be the only concern I have. I actually think Andre should be given a chance, even if he doesn't have as hard a shot. The thing is, have more faith that Andre can get the puck through, and he has better vision than Risto. But I mean, I'm willing to try anything right now. We talked to that to death with Bill. There's no doubt. So, just last one from me. The whole thing with Zamula was funny. The Flyers end up with Phil Tomasino, and Zamula goes to Pittsburgh, and then I guess Dan Milstein got a hold of Kyle Dubas and talked him into a termination. He ends up with the Blue Jackets, and the Flyers have a minor victory on this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a sad culmination there because, like, you know, you had such high hopes for Zamula at the beginning, and he seemed like he was kind of like a John Tortorella favorite. But it was like he had a chance to be the top power play guy, and he had the size, but it was like every year it was like, dude, are you getting thinner? Like, are you actively losing muscle? Like, I could get it. Like, trust me, I know. If you get fatter over time, I get it. That happens with age. But I mean, it felt like he was getting weaker year over year. But on a more serious note, it's unfortunate because there was a time where he would have made a lot of sense. Like, if he was, let's say, a left shot guy that could play in the top four with a Jamie Drysdale, and you add an extra big body there, and, you know, then you could give, like, I think that would have made it would have been a big change for them. But it was just clear that, you know, even this year, I didn't Tocchet anoint him in camp as their number 5, like, just flat out said he's our number 5. And he chunked that too. Like, he couldn't beat out the likes of Ty Murchison and Adam Yinning. And, you know, Emil Andre's just an overall better player. But even on the right side, like a Noah Juleson, it was just time to move on. I feel for him because I think that there was potential there. And I think he made sense stylistically a lot. But at the end of the day, like, he clearly fell out of favor, and they clearly prefer what they like from Adam Yinning or Ty Murchison.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So I think we're going to call it there. Ant, why don't you tell the folks where they can find your work?
Dailyfaceoff.com every Tuesday and Friday. Obviously, check out the piece yesterday on the Ristolainen rumors that I've heard lately. And of course, the kind of the contract details, or not details, just like what led up to the eventual contract of Christian Dvorak. But thanks for having me on, guys, and looking for the next one. And I'm sorry for bailing last. Well, I guess it was technically last year.
Yeah, it was. You were right the first time, brother.
Let's hope your back feels better, man.
Yeah, I feel better.
I appreciate it. I turned 30 and everything fell apart. So there you go.
I'm 46, and these guys.
Wait till you get to 50.
Wait till you get to 66.
Yeah, you should see my latest MRI from hockey. I've got like 2 tears in my hip labrum and a tendon tear and a meniscus knee. So it's getting old sucks, man.
Ruptured disc L4, L5. That's what I have.
Only one.
But
you're still young. You can do better.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
All right, Ann. You take care. Take care of yourself.
Thanks, Ann.
Right. All righty. So, look, anybody with a final comment? We had a lot. I didn't get to. We only covered about 70% of what we had in the synopsis there. But hey, Chef, why don't you give us your last word?
All right. Yeah, my last word is this. Hey, look. Sometimes the players win the deal, and that's what you have with Dvorak. I do believe Russ was talking about it on his show on what do you call it?
Locked On.
Locked On. Thank you. Blah blah blah. And he was talking about sometimes win, and he's right. Yeah, it just happened to play the cards. The players had to play the cards that they had, and I feel like they're in the same situation with Zegras too. They're going to have to play the cards. It won't be as bad. I think as an overpay as Dvorak is, but Zegras. So, but hey, look, man, you want to argue with us about it? We're all on Twitter here. We're all on X. You can find me at Chef to Left B on X. Just look at my little picture here, and you can see it. Chef to Left B on.
You got
X.
it. Right, Dan, last words for us.
Going to the Flyers game Saturday with my mom. Should be fun. I haven't been to a game in a little while. So looking forward to that. And let's just hope it's a fun rest of the season. Got my boy Marky.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank all the people that came in with their comments. Just a packed show. We really couldn't get to it. I did want to get Mr. Bones 009 talking about Christian Kyrou as a quarterback for the power play. I just think he's too green right now. There may be some future for him. Maybe he's kind of like Andre Jr., but maybe he's a little better. I don't know. I don't see that. But in the next year or so, we'll find out what Christian Kyrou has to offer. I'll leave it at that. So the last other thing is we mentioned Dan Vladar will represent Czechia at the Olympics. Travis Sanheim will be with Canada. Rasmus Ristolainen will be, of course, with Finland. And Rodrigo Abels would be with representing Latvia. So congratulations to those guys. But we had it in our notes that we were going to talk about it, so I just spoke about it. So you can follow the O&B Puckcast on X and Blue Sky at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck, on Getter at O&B Puckcast. And, of course, you can follow the O&B Puckcast on several podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, Amazon Audible, and, of course, on YouTube and Facebook. If you're watching this right now, just type in O&B Puckcast. It'll pop right up. Of course, you could be listening to this on a delay. But either way, we really do appreciate if you subscribe or follow, whatever applies, because it helps move us up the charts when people are looking for a Philadelphia Flyer podcast. So that's all we have for you tonight. I hope you've enjoyed one of our favorite, most popular shows of the year, the Midseason Review. And until next time, go to X or Blue Sky or Getter to find out when our next show will be, because we're not really sure. Everybody, good night and take care.